5, let's look at, let's kind of review where it is that we're coming from. And that is that what the pleasure trap is it's a very new perspective on the nature of motivation. That's actually what the book is about. The book, and if we're going to understand motivation, what we're really talking about is the nature of animal behavior. We're talking about motives. Why do creatures do what they do? In order to understand why creatures do what they do, we have to understand why life does what it does. And the nature of life and understanding what life was up to was not understood until the early 1960s. So the breakthrough was made by William Hamilton, who was a graduate student at the University of London. And it became known as the gene's eye view of evolution. And so what that view is the notion that that you have to understand that the purpose of life forms is to proliferate the genes that built it. And that what you see today is that you're looking at history's greatest hits. So the things that are here, the species that are here are species that have been extraordinarily successful relative to other species at surviving and reproducing. And how have you done? You had 2 litters of kittens. There she goes. All right. So this view of nature explains further that there are essentially 2 motives. And the motives are, the fundamental motive is what we're going to call gene survival, or whether or not the genes get into the next generation. Now put aside that if you're a human like AJ and myself, who are biological failures, okay, we put that aside and notice that creatures weren't designed by nature to know what caused offspring. They're simply designed to do things as effectively as possible in order to have their genes be successful. And so what that's going to mean is that everything about any plant or animal is either for a survival aspect or a reproductive aspect. It's important to understand this because there is no third reason. There can't be. So if when you're looking at a plant and you're like a magnolia tree and you see the flowers and you see the leaves and you see a root structure popping out of the ground and the architecture of the branches, that they become smaller at the top and they're bigger and stronger towards the base. That is not an accident. That's because of the nature of physics and the problems that organism faces. That is the ideal architecture for the environment from which the genes came. A magnolia tree could not have evolved in the Arctic. It doesn't have the architecture for that. The broad leaves would give up too much heat. So the only thing you're going to see in the Arctic is going to be these pine-like and conifers that have very, very slow-growing architecture where they're able to hold their heat and the light very, very effectively, and they don't shed their leaves. So broadleaf trees live in abundance, and they eat up sunshine and produce huge leaves, and then throw their seeds all over the place to the wind, hoping to reproduce like crazy. And they produce tremendous biomass. It gets just recycled, etc. That's a very different thing than a conifer. And so everything about every kind of organism, the reason why it has the features that it has is for survival or reproduction or both, but not a third motive. Now, that's important. So this is why monkeys swing from the trees. This is why birds sing. It's why frogs croak. It's why animal behavior is what it is. An animal's behavior is either for survival, or it's for reproduction, or it's both. Usually it's one or the other. So there's no third reason. Now, I can't tell you how important that is to understand. That when you get rid of the concept of a reason, for example, for personal growth, okay? A person doesn't do something for personal growth. They don't do something to defend their ego, okay? These are the kind of motives that you'll hear in pop psychology and Freudian psychology. That's not why. That may be an interesting description that has elements of truth in it, but the ultimate truth is the reason why something is done is to increase survival, increase reproduction, or both. There is no third reason. Now, so if we're to understand people, we have to understand that what we're looking at is we're looking at motivations that were sculpted across evolutionary time in order to increase the likelihood of survival or reproduction or both. Look at your body. Do you see anything extra on it? Okay? Do we see a little flower growing out from the side of my head or a cactus leaf? We don't. Okay? Everything that we're looking at has either a survival purpose or a reproduction purpose or both. Okay? There isn't some strange little thing there that's not there for anything. Every single feature of the organism has a purpose. Now, so if we start looking at all the behavior you see out of people, so I just listed a few before I came on tonight. Sneezing, so purpose, yep. Okay. How about coughing? Yep. How about diarrhea? Yes. How about smiling? Yes. Okay. How about laughing? Yes. How about blushing, preening, showing off, plotting, scheming, clapping, hissing, staring? Every single one of these things is a human universal. And what they are is they're caused by the activation of neural circuits that were shaped by evolution, just in the same way that this finger has the potential to move this way but not the other way. It's constrained in how it moves, and the reason why it moves the way it moves is because that ability to move like that increased the likelihood of my ancestors being able to survive and reproduce. Okay? That's why it moves that way. It's interesting that it's very, very limited in how it can move, because if you start to make it too flexible in what it does, then it can't do it can't do things very, very well. So what we're going to see is the parts of the body are very narrow and specialized in what it is that they do, and they're very different than the other parts. So what this does is very different than what the nose does. They work differently, they have a different structure, and they have a different function, etc. Now, same thing with behaviors. So laughing is very different than sneezing. It has a very different function. So now where we are. Where we are is that each part of your body is specifically engineered to do a specific function, and they're very different than the other parts. So the kidney is very different than the heart is very different from your big toe. Each one of them has a very different architecture. They're built differently and they do different things. Now, what psychologists didn't understand is that when you look at human behavior, you're watching the same thing. What you're actually watching is different neural circuits that are actually shaped differently, actually built differently inside the brain. It's so complicated in there that we couldn't figure it out, not until the late 20th century. So now you start realizing, oh, the brain's not just some amorphous mass any more than your body. If you cut into it, it's just an amorphous mass. It's not just like a big chunk of cheese, but it's all the same in there. It's all different in there. And the same thing is true of your mind. So the different components of your mind are actually engineered so that there's a part of your mind that allows you to speak. There's a part of your mind that allows you to hear. There's a part of your mind that allows you to move your hand. There's another part of your mind that makes you able to hiccup. And the same thing is true when you start looking at all the things that people do, like staring at somebody if you're flirting. That's actually an instinct inside of human mind. Also blushing, okay, that's an instinct inside the mind. It's like you didn't learn that's just in there. And so when you understand why it is that people do what they do, we can now see that what it is it's a chain of instincts. So when you go to your mailbox, you have an instinct to be able to feel what it is that's in your hand, and you're feeling for your keys. Now, you don't have an instinct for feeling keys, but you have an instinct for determining shapes from what you have in your hand. And so you mix the things that you learn with the instincts. And that's what you see when you see the behavior of humans. Now, so what you're really seeing is you're seeing like a combination or a stream, a behavioral stream. It's kind of like if you were to see some skilled person in anything, cooking or playing basketball or playing a guitar, what you're watching when you're watching a guitar player do a bunch of complicated things is you're actually watching a series of fundamentals. That each fundamental, that person had to learn that thing, a fundamental at a time. And then when you put it together, it looks very, very complicated. But actually, you're just watching of the integration of elements. That's the same thing. You know, that's why you can have a recipe in the kitchen. And a cook that is really a good cook, they're very skilled at each of the movements that's associated with putting this thing together. That's why somebody can put it together in a tenth the time that somebody else can, because they know how to chop an onion. And they've done it 1,000 times and they're really fast at it. That's a fundamental of the kitchen. So when you're looking at the behavior of organisms like a cat, all you're watching is a string of instincts. You're watching the activation of a chain. And the same thing is true of people. So this is an extraordinary revolution in understanding human nature that didn't take place. It began in the mid-'80s. It finally got some formal steam in the 1990s in academia. It is still not widely known. And however, it sits in the very elite places in academia, battling against alternative views that are incorrect. The alternative views are much more seemingly politically correct. It's the notion that you can turn anybody into anything. And this turns out to be not true. You cannot train your child to be an aardvark. It will never happen. You can't even turn a boy into a girl in terms of their behavior and what it is that they want to do. That's just trying to move a human around. You can't do it, okay? It's even more difficult. It turns out that you can't turn an introvert into an extrovert or an extrovert into an introvert. So it's going to turn out that once we start to understand why it is that creatures do what they do, we find out that what humans are doing is not all that mysterious. They're sneezing, they're staring, they're flirting, they're plotting, they're trying to rise in dominance hierarchies, they're attempting to do things to enhance their status, they're attempting to learn things to share information with others. All of these things are human instincts. This is really important to understand because then we can finally understand what happens when things go wrong. So the pleasure trap is a manifesto that basically says the reason why things go wrong in the modern environment in such vast numbers, in epidemic numbers, is because the instincts are being activated in a way that they weren't designed for. That is a revolutionary worldview. Let me tell you what the alternative worldview is. The alternative worldview is if you're struggling with the pleasure trap, there's something wrong with you. That some damage was done to you that disturbed and wrecked your natural motivational design. Really? Imagine how robust that motivational design really is. If it crossed hundreds of millions of years of evolution, of all kinds of traumatic things happening to animals, what they did was those animals persevered despite having traumatic things happen to them, and they continued to use the instincts as best they could in whatever environmental circumstances they found themselves. Okay? They didn't change strategies. They simply had anxiety warning them when they were getting into trouble if something previously caused trouble. Now, I was in the airport yesterday. I took my mother on a little trip and showed her Niagara Falls. Nice. So we came home, and when I was in the airport, I do something that I now once in a while do in airports, and that's that I stand at the crossroads where people walk by. And I watch people and I notice their shape. I didn't used to pay that much of attention, but now I'm doing this just out of my own morbid curiosity. Okay? And what do I see? I see about 75% or 80% of the people are overweight. and probably 2/3 of those are very, very significantly overweight. Now, one view is that they're overweight because all these terrible things happen to them. And that's why they're soothing their souls with food. Really. That is a bizarre conception. It may make us feel like it's not our fault, but the truth is it makes no biological sense at all. The truth of the matter is that what you're seeing is instincts, just like you see all over the animal kingdom. You're seeing exactly the same phenomenon that you see everywhere. If you go into a bar and watch the behavior, do you really, of the flirtation behavior that goes on to a bar, do you think you're observing something different than survival and reproduction behavior? Or do you think that if you see that behavior in Amsterdam and you see it in Tokyo and you see it in New Guinea, it's all going to look pretty much the same? It's the activation of the fundamentals of what it means to be a human. Now, so if we see a bunch of people overeating systematically for decades and gaining weight inexorably from the time they're 15 to the time they're 65, what is it that we're really seeing? Are we seeing something wrong with the organism, that it's messing up its motivational structure and it's no longer following the demands of survival and reproduction? What would be the third motive that we've never found in nature that would fall outside of survival and reproduction as the motivation? I don't know. Something bad happened to it, so now it does bad things. Okay. How about this? It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, only we've changed the environment that it's acting in. How about that for an explanation? How about if we take that same explanation into the lab and use any single animal species that you can choose, any one you want, and we do exactly the same thing to it, and we find out whether or not those animals are inexorably designed and will go after whatever the rich food supply is. Doesn't matter whether it's instincts or hippopotamuses. It all is the same. And it's the same for humans. So the pleasure trap is a manifesto that says there's nothing wrong with you. Right? That if we're trying to understand why people are doing a self-destructive behavior, it isn't because they have a self-destructive urge or process in them from some twisted motivational structure that's causing them to go against their best interests. Instead, what we're going to see is that you have an instinct that is being activated that is confused. It's a confused instinct. The instinct is saying we should go after the richest food in the environment and we should save as much energy as possible in the process. It's the same instinct that's inside of all animal life. It's the same fundamental constraint on design that you see in every plant. Get the most sunlight for the least amount of architecture that you can. Now, so what do we really say this is? It's a trap. Man, what a trap. It's a trap that continues to be underestimated even by people that have worked with me or close to me and have listened to me talking about this for 20 years or 5 years. And they still wander off into the weeds and they try to invent psychological other reasons. And I would like to ask them, what do you think those other reasons are serving in terms of survival and reproductive best interests? What instinct do you think you could engineer into a system that would reduce the likelihood of the organism reproducing? You can't. It's not the way it's designed. Now, so the road home is looking at a hard truth. And before we reached the road home, which was chapter 17, which I wrote in one sitting. I sat down and I wrote it straight. And I wrote it actually on the night of September 11th, 2001. So I woke up, it was my birthday, and I woke up, I went to sleep at about 3 o'clock. I was with Alan, of all things. Very uninspiring thing to do is to be in a hotel room with Alan Goldhammer. So he went to sleep at about 10 or 11, and I was up till 3 o'clock. I was determined to finish the pleasure trap on my birthday. And I woke up 2 or 3 hours later, early in the morning. We were in Florida, and then the Twin Towers were afire. So that was the day that I finished the pleasure trap. That was the day that it was finished. It would be published for 2 more years. But before we go to the road home and what I was trying to encapsulate in the final chapter, we talk in the previous chapter about water fasting. And there's sort of two concepts that I wanted to get across. And there's a quote from one of my favorite scientists and favorite authors, Carl Sagan, that opens chapter 16, which is the Show Me the Data, which is called Extraordinary Claims Require Extraordinary Evidence. And what if you think the moon's made of green cheese, you better prove it to us. You're gonna have to give us some strong evidence. If you think that there is another force in the universe that Deepak Chopra has tapped into, or the Dalai Lama, you're going to have to talk to my friends at Caltech and MIT, because there's 4 forces in the universe. There's the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity. There is no 5th force in the universe. And so the Show Me the Data is knowing that if we're going to make an extraordinary claim that the vast majority of treatable health ills, which means the vast majority of health ills, are the result of dietary excesses and not any kind of deficiencies, then it would stand to reason that it would be possible that if we removed the excesses, that we might remove the diseases. And we did. So Alan had learned about water fasting as a very young man, and he had found the American Natural Hygiene Society, which was a group of kooks that the doctors met once a year. They came from all over the world. There's about 8 of them or so. And they met and they had a little conference, and people would come to listen to them. And they weren't very good speakers, but they were who they were. And one of the speakers that seemed like a very smart guy and very thoughtful guy was a guy by the name of Alec Burton. And he was the president of an osteopathic school, university in Australia. And he was also a chiropractor. So he was both conventional training in medicine as well as chiropractic. And he ran a small fasting facility where he fasted people. And his concept was you have to get rid of the excess, and you have to see whether or not people will, whether the body will unwind the problem. And he would, Alan went to this thing for 2 or 3 years and could see these docs telling these stories, and it made intuitive sense to him. So he went up to Burton and said, hey, I'm going to finish my degree, and when I finish my degree, can I come and be an intern? And Burton said, I don't think so. He goes, well, I'll come and I'll work really hard and I don't need to be paid. And, okay, well, Burton said, all right, well, when you finish. So Alan didn't talk to him until he was finished. And he waited, and then he went up to Burton at the next summer and he says, okay, I'm finished. When can I come? So Burton had forgotten that he had made this promise that had been 2 or 3 years earlier. And Alan, being Alan, he cornered him and pushed him. And then Burton said, okay, so there's going to be no stopping this kid. So Alan Goldhammer became the first intern that Alec Burton ever trained in this procedure. And he went to Australia, and then he got his wife over there, and they stayed for a long time, and they fasted a ton of people. And Alan would send me tapes. We communicated by cassette tape because it was too expensive to talk on the phone. It was $1 a minute, and we were just kids. And he would tell me about cases that he was seeing, and he would say, if this one gets well, I'll really believe it. And then 3 weeks later, he'd say, yeah, that one got well. But now I have another one, and if this one gets well, then I'll really believe it. And all year long, it was like, if this one gets well, I'll really believe it. He had an ALS case, a deadly autoimmune disease, got well. Fasted the guy some ridiculous length of time, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that. Alec Burton had a biopsy-confirmed liver cancer from a hospital in Sydney. The guy said he wanted to fast. The hospital said, well, we can't do anything for you. Do whatever you want. It's a terminal case. Burton fasted him over 70 days, and the cancer turned into scar tissue, and the man lived. So this isn't to make bizarre claims, because we don't think that there's necessarily any great shakes, but Alan's having good success with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma now, and has written up a case study in the British Medical Journal, and there's other cases to follow. But we're not here to talk about that. What we're here to talk about is a general principle, and the general principle is that a great many of the health problems you will ever see are caused by dietary excesses, and if you remove all of the food and let the body essentially unwind the problem and detoxify and eat its own tissue that it's already purified the food and stored it as fat, if you do that, then people get better. And they get better faster and better than anything else you'll ever see. It doesn't seem to matter what the condition is. This appears to be the best thing. This should be the first line of treatment for just about everything. Now, that's not going to be true if you've got a mitral valve prolapse. There's a time and a place for intervention cardiology, and there's certainly fasting is going to be the best way to fix your broken leg. There's many, many areas of knowledge in medicine, and there's many things that are known and many techniques that are useful. But overall, for the greatest majority of problems that most people face in this society, the problem is that they have accumulated dietary excesses. They have organs that are exhausted and toxic. And what they need to do is they need to live off their considerable fat reserves while they unwind and detoxify the entire system, and then they get better. It's incredible. We chose high blood pressure as a demonstration. We could have chosen diabetes, could have chosen a lot of things, but it turns out we had a lot of diabetic hypertensive type cases. So when we decided what we were going to go through our files, we decided, let's not go through there and try to figure out who's diabetic and not and do a case on both of these. We're just going to take high blood pressure. So we went back and looked at 100, and I think it was 178 consecutive admissions of people that presented with high blood pressure over 12 years at Turner Health Center. And every single one of them got better. No exceptions, 12 years. They came in, they fasted on an average of 12 days, and they walked out off of all of their high blood pressure medication, and every single person was normotensive. Now, if that doesn't get your attention, what will? Obviously, the greatest improvements were with the people that were the sickest. So people that were at the highest stages of high blood pressure, people of 180 or above, their average drop of blood pressure was 60 points. They walked out with completely normal blood pressures. If it turns out that they started out with like 160, then they would drop about 40 points, and they walked out with normal blood pressure. If it turned out they were at about 140 when they came in, they dropped about 20 points, and they walked out with normal blood pressure. This is what happened. Everybody got better. When you see something like that, you realize you're just looking at the truth of nature. You just get out of the way, feed people water, and it turns out the system will engineer its own healing. This is, of course, precisely what happened in human natural history. This is exactly what happened to people. How did people get well? They didn't run to the pharmacy. How did people get well? They didn't run to the surgeon. They had to do something. And it turns out that nature figured out what they should do. Nature engineered for them a desire to not eat when they got sick. That's what happened. And it turns out that's a ubiquitous behavioral adaptation throughout the animal kingdom. Animals get sick, they don't want to eat. The same thing for humans. It's going to turn out that we can electively use that. So you may still want to eat, but you are 50 pounds overweight and you're diabetic and hypertensive. Turns out that that all we have to do is just feed you water in an environment of complete rest, and the whole thing will just unwind. and away it goes. This is spectacular. We attempted to publish this. We were fortunate that we had befriended Colin Campbell, and so Colin knew the integrity of how it is that we did things, and so he said, "I want to help you publish," and we were going to take this to a major journal, and so this is a humorous anecdote. Humorous, I guess, to the few people that are in it. And that I told Alan, I was coming out of academia, and I said, it's not going to happen. You wait and see. We're running into major political problems. And Alan said, no, Colin says it's not going to be a problem. He's a real big shot, Doug. You know, you may have published 7 or 8 articles, but he's published 400. He's a big dog. He knows what he's doing. I said, no, he doesn't know what he's up against. Naive, idealistic Colin Campbell, a great man of science who believes that this thing should be honorable and fair and reasonable and open-minded. No, I didn't think so. And so, we got all of our data together, and Colin helped us with a statistician at Cornell, Benu Parpia, great mathematician. And so we sent this thing off to the major journals that Colin was confident would be interested, and they all rejected us. Their rejections were interesting. The New England Journal incredibly thought that since the people were at our place just resting, maybe the reason we didn't have a control group, so maybe the reason was just that it's a really nice place, and that people, we just treated them nicely, and that's why their blood pressures came down. You have to understand, there's no evidence in the world that that's true. That's only in white coat hypertension, for 2 minutes in the office. That has nothing to do with long-standing repeat measurement hypertension. There's no way you can relax your way out of high blood pressure. You can't be done. If that were true, that would be the treatment. No medication program has ever been shown to reduce hypertension. Nothing, zero, nada. Okay? So the notion that we could lock our people up and starve them, and then 3 weeks later, their blood pressure would drop by 60 points when the average drop of antihypertensive medication treatment is 12 points. So we have an effect size 5 times bigger than what they might be expecting from a first-line medication. And they're dismissing it that they got nice treatment. Ridiculous. Colin was unbelievably disgusted. So then we went to the next journal, same kind of talk. Then we went to the journal Hypertension, not interested. Finally, Colin went to the, he was a major editor for many, many years on the editorial staff at the, it's called the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. And so he sent it to his editor, to the editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief would not even look at it, just send it back. Like, no, not looking at it. Colin's like, hey, I'm asking you for a personal favor. Like, don't even talk to me. That's what happened. We eventually wound up in a small journal, refereed journal, and the referees looked at the thing, asked a few questions. They didn't have any, they weren't hooked into any big pharmaceutical companies. They didn't have big ads in their it's not like the, what do you call it? The AMA, JAMA, big old ads for drugs. So we got it in the Journal of, I think, Applied or Physiological Therapeutics, some, obscure but scientific refereed and index journal. And that's where we were. That's where the most potent finding in the history of research on hypertension sits. Well, Colin got a little midlife education there about how that works, and so since that time, we have collected more data. We're now getting more sophisticated about how we're collecting the data. We've now been accepted at the top journals in the world for the case study on cancer reversal and a follow-up to that case study. So the doors are opening. Now, this is 20 years later. There's been research on fasting now has come out of various quarters in the academic world. There's a lot more excitement about it. There's going to be a bunch of garbage that will be promised and about it that won't wind up panning out. But what we were here to say is what we started with, which is that the problem is dietary excess, and that the solution, the ultimate solution, is to water fast, and after that, or short of that, the solution is to eat a diet that's consistent with your natural history. Now, one thing that happens, interestingly enough, when a person water fasts is that then they like natural food better, because there's a rapid reacclimation. The cells are all cleaning house. The whole thing's cleaning house. Your liver's cleaning house. Your taste buds are cleaning house. Your brain is cleaning house. It's a major house cleaning. And this isn't to say that it's magic, because it's not necessarily going to hold. And when you go out in the world and you're lured in by pizza, you're still back to the fight. But we don't have a part of the fight that we had before. And that is, after water fast, you like the taste of natural foods just like you would expect. So this is why, if you've ever experienced this, or if you're a doctor and you've ever seen it, this is why doctors come to True North and they want to work there, because if they practice traditional medicine and they want to get generally sick people well, they're not just a technician. There's technicians doing great work out there that just, they clip a little something out of your ear, or they do whatever it is that they do. It's good. We're not discounting the utility of modern medicine. What we're saying is that for the vast majority of problems that people have, it's not the solution. But the solution is unbelievably low tech. The solution is let the person rest in an environment of complete rest and drink pure water, and problems unwind. And that's why Dr. Nathan Hirschfeld at Fasting Escape in Southern California couldn't keep his hands out of it. He wanted to go out on his own for a while, and he did. He became an outpatient doctor, and then he finally said, you know what, I cannot stop thinking about the cases I saw get better at True North. He's a Southern California young man, and he wanted to live back near his folks in Southern California, so he didn't want to stay with us at True North. And he finally said, I got to do this again. I want to see sick people get well. And so he's doing it again, and he loves it. The best decision he ever made. And it's the best decision that you might ever do for yourself. If you're someone who is struggling with a significant pathological problem that's nagging along, you can't seem to get over the hump, you can't seem to get out of the pleasure trap, there's nothing like water fasting to help you. And so if you need help, find some people that might be knowledgeable. Obviously, the folks at True North, Dr. Hirschfeld is knowledgeable, Frank Sabatino in Florida on the East Coast. There's a handful of people in the United States that are knowledgeable about this, and Gracie Ewan, Dr. Ewan in Ohio. There's people that know, and it's not like a million people will ever listen to me discuss this. It's not like a million people will ever read The Pleasure Trap and learn about the power of this. But if you know it, it's always been, since the time I knew it as a young man from listening to Alan's tapes, saying, if this one gets well, then I'll really believe it. And then myself, as a young scientist, looking at the data and looking at 178 consecutive cases getting better. When I read textbooks on hypertension saying, chronic degenerative problem gets worse, you manage it. It's Anthony Lim's favorite phrase, management. That's what he learned in med school, management. So we manage hypertension. You don't need to manage hypertension. You need to get rid of it. So that's the story from there. And I believe that we made the case well. For people that are open-minded enough and not locked into a view of a medication, allopathic view of the world, the case we make in Show Me the Data is saying, listen, we'll show you the data. And if you want to listen to more data, we've got more. And that's what we're going to be doing, for the next 20 years. As long as we live, we're going to be showing them more and more data that this is the way that we could help sick people get well. The road home is the story that says, listen, we were born all parts of us, all of our impulses and our physical structure and our nature. We were born for an environment of scarcity where it was hard to get enough. You're born with instincts to work hard physically, to sleep to satiation every night, and to get up with vigor and to go and attack the world in order to get whole natural food. And you didn't know that there was anything beyond whole natural food, and so it was immensely satisfying. And so just like a beautiful snow leopard, you know, as it lives out its life, or a buffalo roaming on the plains the way it was designed, the animals are inherently designed to be healthy. They're not designed to be in midlife going to a medication cabinet and crippling along with a problem. That's not how they're designed. And that's not how they are. And that's not how humans have to be. And so the road home is to go back to our nature. That the solution winds up being there. And I chose carefully the last sentence and the last paragraph as I wrote it. And I've got it right here. I haven't read it in a long time, but I can remember writing it. And that is, it is our hope that these words may be useful in helping you find the road home to your birthright, the pursuit of health and happiness unencumbered by the pleasure trap. For those willing to make the effort to undertake this journey, we offer a warning and a promise. It is likely to be the most difficult and yet most rewarding path to choose. It's the most difficult path. This is not easy. And I wrote those words almost 20 years ago. People have a difficult time grasping the difficulty and challenge of living healthfully. And when they don't, they're very susceptible to alternative explanations that rely on some bizarre thing along with their history that's causing them to be frustrated and self-defeating and etc. That's not what's happening, folks. What's happening is that this is difficult because you're essentially a person with a north-south compass that's been put in a world where the poles have been shifted and it's south-north. You can imagine how tricky it would be to navigate that world if all of the compasses were absolutely wrong. It's like, holy smokes, how are you going to do this? And the only solution is to get so good at it by so much repetition that you just automatically rotate things in your head and you do exactly the opposite of what your impulses might be. So when I go into a restaurant and I can smell the meat cooking, and I can smell the cooking sugar, and I can smell the bread, I can smell it all. But my first instinct is, where's the wet starch on the menu? Because that's what I'm ordering. Okay? So I've got a bunch of instincts that are being activated that are telling me, go south, go south, go south, go south. That's what they're telling me to do. And I'm like, nope, I know you're telling me to go south, and I'm going to go north. That's what I'm going to do. That's why we call it true north. Right? So so that's the story. It's a difficult path, and don't expect to have it be easy. If you have struggled and stumbled 50 times, that is no evidence of any problem with you. You don't need to do any psychodynamic excavation. All we need to do is stare at this thing and realize that we can easily trap any member of any species with the pleasure trap. It's trivial. It's child's play to do this. We can almost do the same with humans. There's a modest percentage of humans that have the intelligence and the conscientiousness to look at the trap and say, wait a minute. I can go against it. Okay. It's not most people. This will never be a widespread secret that gets discovered and gets implemented. This is never going to happen. Okay. Getting out of the pleasure trap is beyond the reach of the vast majority of people. But the people that are listening to me and have put up with me for the last 6 or 7 hours and have read this book and listened to AJ, if you put up with all this, you're one of these people. You're one of these people that can do it. Now, just because you're one of the people that can doesn't mean that you will. And for goodness sakes, don't think that your family members will, or your mother, or your dad, or your kids. Forget it. Okay? You. It's hard enough for you. It's hard enough for me. Okay? This is the road home is to realize, okay, everything is telling me to go south. I'm going north. And if you do that consistently enough, you don't even look at the other places on the menu. I go into a Chinese restaurant, I don't even look. If it says pork, I don't look at it. Then it says chicken, I don't look at it. I'm looking for the thing that says vegetables. Okay, now I'm looking. I'm not even looking at anything else on the menu. Okay? That started 40 years ago. And so now it's in there, and that's how I can do it. That doesn't mean that if I smell something from another table that's greasy, that my mind doesn't pick up the fat that's in the air and can't pick up the scent of burning sugar from some sweet and sour pork and some fat in there. Of course I can smell it. Does it have appeal? Of course it does. Do I ever eat it? No. No, I never do. Okay. So this is the story. I'm not saying that I never make a mistake, but it's not going to be with that. That's the story of the pleasure trap. So the pleasure trap is a strange story. It isn't ultimately hugely uplifting and inspiring. It can be. It's not depressing and miserable, but it can be. It's like, wow, that's the reason. That's the reason. The reason is that I've got a design system that wasn't built for all of the lures and inducements and enticements that are artificially flashing inside of my, in my consciousness. I wasn't built to do this. It's like flight. You weren't built to do it. So if you've had trouble, please don't despair. Your job is to do what AJ and I, a phrase we've coined, work harder on your environment than you do on yourself. The harder that you work on your environment, the more you transform your food environment to look like the Stone Age. The more you do that, the better, more success you're going to have. And the more success that you're going to have, then what will happen is it gets a little bit easier, and it gets a little bit easier, and it gets a little bit easier. And then finally, it's just not that hard. Okay? It seems to me that many of our icons have walked this journey so long ago that they lose touch with how difficult it is. They know in principle, but they don't feel it down in their soul because it happened a long time ago. And it's kind of like, when people go through something very difficult, they can forget how difficult it was. It's just in the past. So they don't realize, the truth is that this is why this is difficult. Right? It's difficult because you have to get where you are now to get to the other side of the table, where it is that the answer is no. I'm just going to live healthfully. Not an easy road, but it is. It is the most difficult, and it is the most rewarding path to choose. All right, AJ.
That's beautiful, Dr. Lau. Thank you. Well, I think it's certainly worth a try if people want to do water fasting. That it doesn't seem to be any harm if they've been suffering. So before we get to the questions, and there are many, I just want you to know, I just want to briefly answer the questions that I know I can answer right here and clear those first, such as, what is the name of the water fasting place in Ohio? It's called Dr. Gracie's, I think, Fasting Center or Wellness Center. I believe it's in or near Columbus, but we can get you that information if you can't find it through Google. And then people are asking for the starch targets. I know that Zena is watching. So Zena, if it is not in the member center, would you mind getting that information to Toby? Because we can certainly put it in the member center. I got a question. What's my favorite rice? So I'm going to answer it. It's called Texmati rice and the Lundberg rice, the organic blend that they have at Costco. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Lots of nice comments about having the kiddies on. and about the fact that you did the bonus class. It was much appreciated. And by the way, guys, some of the questions that came in again were answered on the bonus session that's in the Member Center. So please listen to that, because some of these questions were answered during that recording. And they like your painting and are asking if you did it in paint night. I believe you did. And so that's terrific. So why don't we start with the fasting questions, since this is what tonight was about. And the first one is from Gina, and wanted to know, Dr. Lisle, how often do you fast?
Not very often. So every 3-4 years. So nobody knows what would be a good thing. It's probably sort of akin to changing your oil. If you change your oil every 5,000 miles, that's kind of okay. It's pretty good. If you change it every 3,000 miles, it's better. If you change it every 1,000 miles, it's probably not worth the trouble. So it's probably just a waste of time and energy. So there's some sweet spot in there, and nobody knows. So it would be almost pure speculation. But my guess is probably every 3 to 5 years, it would be good to go a week without food.
Wow. I haven't done it yet, and I'm almost 60, so we'll see. So Barb and Charlotte have the same question. Is there any benefit to doing a 3-day water fast since it's so short, and can you do it maybe twice a month without any negative consequences?
Well, I wouldn't do something like that twice a month. No, but a 3-day water fast is not trivial. It's not nothing. I would be pretty restful during that process, so I wouldn't go out in your yard and mow the lawn. And I wouldn't go to work. So I would just kind of hunker down and, watch AJ on videos or something, and spend you really won't be in the fasting state for 24 hours. So nothing special is happening in the first day other than you're hungry. You're in glucose metabolism. You still have glycogen stored in your liver, which is essentially like a gas tank. So your gas tank is still full. And until that gas tank empties, you don't start burning fat off your fat stores. So when people are thinking, well, I'm going to skip lunch and that'll help me lose weight, it's not doing anything of the kind. No fat will burn off of your body until you're going to get the glycogen stores gone. So the water fast won't really start its detoxification process until you burn up those glycogen stores, and now you are in a legitimate fasting state. You're now in ketosis, and now there's a huge house cleaning process that begins. So if you go a couple of days into that process, that's a good thing to do. How much good it does relative to, say, a 7-day fast is probably considerably more. It's kind of like the cheap car wash versus the really expensive one. And when they do the expensive car wash, they do a much better job on your tires and all that sort of thing. And so that's, a 3-day water fast is like an exterior wash. They don't even vacuum it. But it's better than nothing. A 1-week water fast, which you wouldn't do on your own, that's more like, you paid pretty full price and they went in there and vacuumed. So not trivial. A 3-day water fast, which I think I'm not going to talk about. If you have health problems, health issues, cardiac issues, no, don't even. I'm not giving anybody the green light to do this. If you are healthy and solid without any known significant, dangerous, edgy pathology, then a water fast for 3 days on your own is completely reasonable. You should be aware that within a day or so, you're likely to be lightheaded. And your biggest risk is that you'll stand up too quickly and you might just keel over and pass out and hit your head on the floor. So that's why you have to know that it's coming. It won't hit you all of a sudden, but you'll forget. So you have to be vigilant. You may want to put a rubber band on your wrist or a little red band around your wrist to remind you, oh, that's right. Be careful when I stand up. And so you stand up kind of slowly so that you don't wind up having that problem happen.
Yeah, I've seen it happen. My roommate at True North, he had only fasted 5 days, and then they came and brought him his own green juice,
Yeah. Good, very good. Better you than me.
Yeah, that's a different facility that brings. Anyway, so I remember, like when he held his hand out for the glass, it felt like it was 50 pounds and he dropped it. That's
Right.
how, how weak he was. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Dr. Gracie's Wellness Center, Debbie posted, is southeast of Cleveland, Ohio. So I stand corrected. I said Columbus. So thank you for posting that. And Charlotte is asking for the name of the water fasting facility in Florida. And since she's asking for that, I may as well announce this. I wasn't going to, but Charlotte, the facility is called Balance for Life. It's in Deerfield Beach, very close to Fort Lauderdale. And if you would like to see Dr. Lisle in person on the beach, my 60th birthday, which is March 22nd, 2020, I am hosting a 5-day event there, 5 days, 4 nights, and I invited my favorite friends and favorite speakers to join me. And it's none other than Dr. Doug Lisle, who will be speaking almost every single day, Dr. Stefan Esser, who knows a lot about fasting because his grandfather was Dr. Esser, Dr. Frank Sabatino, who's the medical director there, and John Pierre. So you can see us all at Balance for Life next March, if you like. So thank you. So Vicki said, you mentioned that somebody that had liver disease fasted. Surprised to hear this is okay. Does True North accept such people?
No, I think if you had some case like that, you'd have to write to Dr. Alan Goldhammer, and he would then talk to you about it because probably every case is different and every situation is different. And so, so the answer is I wouldn't know.
Right.
That would be a case-by-case determination.
So, but are there any really known contraindications to fasting? Because I read on some other site that people, like, for example, that are anorexic or even bulimic or a history shouldn't fast because that often worsens their disease.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody that's talking this way wouldn't know, because nobody that's out there talking about fasting knows anything about it because they don't do it.
Right.
True North is the preeminent research facility in the world. We fasted some 15,000 people.
Yeah.
So any doctor that says, oh, no, you can't fast because this or that would happen, is a doctor that has never seen a water fast and is absolutely just nothing other than hearsay. It's like gossip from a soap opera column. They have no idea what they're talking about. Now, turns out that there is a rare genetic condition that makes it impossible for some people to fast. 1 in 10,000 people has that gene. And so if you begin fasting, it gets extremely unpleasant very, very quickly, and you can't do it. So that is a contraindication for fasting. There are a number of contraindications for fasting where you wouldn't want to push the envelope on certain disease conditions, and there's certain conditions where when that's the prominent problem that the person has, you wouldn't fast for it. So we're not going to fast for a valve prolapse in the heart. It's no reason for us to fast for that. We wouldn't fast for a torn meniscus in your knee either. So there's going to be things that we fast for and things that we don't fast for. There's a strong tendency for the diseases that are caused by dietary excesses to be things that you would want to fast for. So atherosclerosis, if you had very serious coronary artery disease, that would be a good thing to fast for. If you had diabetes, hypertension, those would be good things. If you had autoimmune diseases of various kinds, that would probably do well. Asthma, colitis, ulcerative colitis. Alan's going to shoot me. Mm-hmm. Those are hard cases, and he doesn't necessarily want to see them. But lupus, these are things where rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of success. They're dicey, they're difficult, they're painful, but fasting can be miraculous. And so you just don't know what the person's body is able to do until you give it a chance.
Terrific, because Arinka, actually, the next question was what conditions respond well, which you listed. And again, Dr. Alan Goldhammer and Dr. Nate Gershfeld will talk to you on the phone for free to see if fasting is right for you. Okay, so this is from Victoria. Are you familiar with IFS, internal family systems? And if so, what are your thoughts on this therapy?
I don't, that's some specific brand of systems theory or family systems therapy. So family systems therapy was a style or a way of thinking about treating people that I think was started to become prominent, I think, in the 1960s with a guy by the name of Mnuchin, and there's some interesting ideas in it, and but I'm not going to speak more about this now because I'm not sure what specific flavor she's talking about and what her real questions are. So until I would get more clarity about what she's wanting to know, I can't really answer for
Sure.
that.
Thank you. This is a fun question, though. I think it's fun. Thanking you for your dedication in this class. They're loving it. They said, Dr. Lisle, what is your day like with food and sleep? What do you eat and drink on a daily basis? How often do you go to restaurants, and do you ever fall back? Would you say you do 100% with SOS-free plant-based? Please share your experiences, your fails, weaknesses, and successes.
Yeah, I'm not 100% SOS, and I don't actually aim for that personally. So that's a useful strategy for some people and possibly a necessary one, but it's not necessary for me. And so my life looks an awful lot more like John McDougall. So John McDougall is not SOS free; he's oil free. My life isn't oil free. I would never cook with oil, and but I'm going to go to a restaurant. If I go get Thai food, there's going to be some oil in that vegetable curry. They're going to put it in there, even though there's no oily. I'm not ordering something that's been oiled up, but I'm going to wind up with some oil in my life, and not catastrophizing over that. And there's certainly going to be salt, because I'm going to get salt in restaurants, and I'm going to eat in restaurants fairly often. Take my little mother out to dinner. It's something that we do at the end of the day quite often. And so I'm not going to be eating hunks of animal food. That's not something I'm interested in. So I do well. And my goal is to be healthy and well. I consider how it is that I live very McDougall-like. That's how I look at it. And if you've ever been to a McDougall program, you'll know that there's Mary's chocolate pudding. Okay, so I'm not adverse to this type of thing. And so I'm not, I don't live the way Alan lives. Alan is the hard line. I think he's attempting to set an example for people that are at True North, often with very serious pathologies, and they're down to their last move on the chessboard, and they've got to make the right move. And so Alan serves in his example that says, listen, I could eat anything and be fine, but I'm not. I'm going to eat this, and I'm going to eat whole natural food, and we're not going to put any salt, and we're not going to put any oil, and we're not going to put any sugar. We're going to make this super clean, and we're going to like it, okay? Because it's good enough. As Alan says, True North Health Kitchen, where good food tastes not bad. Okay?
I love that.
Pretty good, okay? It's different than, there's some McDougall foods that you're going to be like, wow, that's really good, okay? And that's why, well, there's a little engineering and a little processing and probably some modest amount of sodium. In other words, there's a little sugar in here somewhere. In other words, it's fancier, and it's great. And it's if I had one last meal, I think it'd probably be Mary McDougall's lasagna.
Nice.
That's probably that's what it would be.
Yeah.
So no, it's a good question. I'm not the hardcore. I'm pretty much Alan is to the right, and John and I are about the same spot.
But I'm pretty sure you don't use alcohol in coffee, if I know that correctly. And how's your sleep? Is it good? Do you sleep good?
Pretty good. The cats get me up early too sometimes. Pretty good. And I exercise pretty regularly, and so all in all, I'm somewhere a B plus A minus liver, on a legitimate scale. I mean, relative to the average person in the population, it's A plus.
Right.
But relative to Alan, it's B plus A minus.
Does he ever lord over you his superior diet? That's
It's just the way it is.
yeah, yeah. It's sort of like when you eat at True North, you go, "This is good." When you eat at the McDougal Pro, you go, "This is good."
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's exactly how it is.
Exactly. So we actually have two questions about eating late. I'll read both of them. Bev says that I eat, is it okay to eat before going to bed? It doesn't seem to affect me adversely. And Arinka says that she usually gets hungry around 10 p.m. And so she's happy with oatmeal, sleeps well next morning. It doesn't eat till 1 p.m. So, you know, different doctors I've talked to, especially GI doctors, don't think it's such a great thing for health or weight loss, but they're asking you what you think.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You're just an animal that's got yourself conditioned to eating at a particular pattern. So we're seeing then that you're not eating till, you know, that you're not getting up in the morning and eating breakfast because essentially you ate breakfast the night before. So no, I don't think anybody has any compelling evidence at all to say that that's a bad idea.
Yeah. I don't sleep well when I eat late. That's just me. It just doesn't feel good.
Different. Yeah, exactly. So this is an individual issue, and so but there's no in principle reason. So this is an example of people not grasping the fact that all you're doing is you're looking at an animal whose job it is to get enough calories, and so there would be no in principle reason why human beings wouldn't be eating after the sun goes down and they've got a fire lit. Of course they would. Okay, so the notion that somehow you shouldn't be eating before you go to bed, there's zero empirical support.
But our ancestors couldn't have done that because they had to be in the cave, and
No, they weren't in the cave, AJ. A lot of times they weren't in caves.
oh,
And if they were in the cave, there's fires in the cave. And people would sneak into cooked food. Trust me. Is everybody else asleep?
That is so funny. That's so funny. Donna says she found the DVDs of The Pleasure Trap and The Continuum very helpful. Are there others? I do want to say that not only are there others on Dr. Lyle's website, which is esteemdynamics.com, some are audio, many of his best lectures, but if you were just to go to YouTube, whether it was my page or YouTube in general, and just put in Dr. Doug Lyle, you'll probably find 50 great lectures. And I would like to put a plug in for the Beat Your Genes podcast, which airs live at 8:30 p.m. live on Blog Talk Radio. And you can find the replays on iTunes, etc., especially that relates to this course, episode 161, where he talks about the pleasure trap and the ego trap. I listened to it again today, probably for the 10th time, and it's marvelous. So I would refer you to those sources if you are a Dr. Lyle junkie. Great, thank you. Cheryl wants to know, does a water fast heal the brain or improve mental function and the nervous system?
Nobody knows because there hasn't been enough research on water fasting since it's basically ignored. Now, so all that I can tell you is that your nervous system is responsive to the general health of the body. So you can feel it. So you can feel when you're sick, can't you? You can feel it's like if you're a boat, suddenly you're towing something, you're towing a barge behind you. You don't have your normal energy level. And when you are sick, it's probably a naturally adaptive mechanism to be somewhat pessimistic. So you don't have your normal enthusiasm, like, oh, let's go do that. You're essentially, your motivation is being curbed by a pessimism and a conservatism, because you may be ill and you may have significantly reduced athletic capacities and mental capacities. And so you tend to not feel good, not be very bright, not very bendy, sunny disposition, depressed, somewhat paranoid, mildly, pessimistic, etc. So a lot of times when people are just sort of generally ill and they don't feel very good physically, because the entire system is being burdened by low-grade pathologies of dietary excess, and then they water fast. And they remove those burdens substantially, and a lot of house cleaning takes place. And what you see is that people feel physically a lot. They feel so much better physically. There is a corresponding correlated lift in their happiness. They feel more able to take on the world. You know how it feels like at night, late, you've been burdened, you've worked all day, there's been 17 problems, and you got some mess, etc. And then you just go to bed and you're just overwhelmed. Then you wake up the next morning, if you get a good night's sleep, you're like, okay, all right, it's not that bad, I can handle it. That's the natural optimism of feeling better. And so that's what I see happens. So the nervous system, is responsive to the general toxic load and general fatigue and health and rest of the body. So when you get the whole body better, the nervous system is in a better, it's going to signal you more happiness and optimism. And that's what I see.
Nice. Roberto said that could it help her Bell's palsy, or would just eating plant-based help the nerve go normal, because Western medicine says she's doomed?
I think she's doomed. Bell's palsy very often reverses. I think it usually does. So I don't know how long her Bell's palsy has gone on and when its original onset was, but yeah, so that I wouldn't know. I remember a Bell's palsy case. I remember somebody fasting for a considerable length of time and the Bell's palsy reversing, but we never knew whether it was the water fast that reversed it or it was just simply a natural process of the Bell's palsy reversing. So I can't say, but obviously if I had Bell's palsy, which is a drooping of one side of your face, if I had that, then and it had been sticking around for a while, and Western medicine was saying, well, we don't know what to do, this is just kind of what it's going to be, I would definitely fast. I would see what would happen.
Certainly worth a try.
Yes.
AA says, how long would you have to eat totally clean to get the same effect as a water fast?
You might not ever get the effect. So obviously they're correlated, but a water fast is its own animal. And so it can accomplish things that healthy living cannot accomplish. That's just how it is. Mm-hmm. So it turns out that buried in the genetic code is a vigorous defense of your essentially architecture. And that the only time when some of the tools come out to play, some of the workmen come out to play to put you back together properly, are deep in a water fast. Mm-hmm. And so that's the truth. We've just watched it, been watching this now for 35 years. And there's just no doubt that's the way it is. We've seen people that have had problems that they were super diligent on their diet, super diligent. Problem doesn't go away. Water fasting for a couple of weeks, problem's gone. It's like, there you go.
Nice.
I've seen that happen 150 times.
Right. And Gary posts that her husband was at True North for Bell's palsy, and he felt he reversed up to 98% of the pain and inflammation because of fasting.
Good.
That's inspiring. Terrific.
Yes.
So you had mentioned earlier that animals get sick, they don't eat, same for humans. So Zena asks, and I've actually seen this at the hospital I volunteer at, why is it when someone is sick and not wanting to eat, other people are trying to cajole and entice them to eat? Do we not recognize that they are trying to heal and it's normal that they may have not lost their appetite? I've seen this happen, especially with cancer patients. Our good intentions in trying to get them to eat inadvertently harming them.
Right. Yeah, that's an example of people sort of reversing cause and effect, which is a very easy thing to do. So try to remind me what the question was, because then
like I've seen this, like you'll be at the hospital and somebody's sick and they don't have an appetite, they don't want to eat, so they'll bring in all this hyper palatable food to try to force the patient to eat because
yeah, because they think that eating is, it seems it's correlated with the animal getting healthier. So I can remember listening to a basketball announcer say, well, that you just need to shoot with confidence. Mm-hmm. So if you look at Jordan, like, he just shoots with confidence. It's like he's confident because he's really good. So he's shooting with confidence because he's really good. He's not really good because he's shooting with confidence. you're not successful because you think successful thoughts. The fact that you have a lot of successful thinking when you're successful is because you have been successful. Okay, so yeah, you're not going to cause the person to be well by feeding them, because when people are well, they eat more vigorously. So this is a great example of confusion of cause and effect. You're absolutely right. This is exactly what goes on, and hopefully, I mean, I don't think that hospital behavior and knowledge has changed that much since we wrote this book. I hear anecdotes. People come in and tell me, I was in the hospital, or I'm looking for a heart problem, and they're bringing these, beef stroganoff, and like, really, like, nothing has changed.
No.
So yeah, that is the mistake. It's a mistaken attribution of cause and effect, and and unfortunately, this is what they will do, and they will try to get sick people to eat as if it's good for them, and of course it's not.
Right. I remember when I had lunch with Dr. Esser, who grew up in a fasting environment, he said even the time when he was the littlest kid, if he had a fever or a cold, they fasted him. And
Yes.
he was better, like, in 12 hours or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, amazing. Leslie wants to know how miserable water fasting is.
You never can tell. Water fasting is like Christmas. You just are not sure what you're going to get. So you can have very easy fasts, and so I watch a lot of people cruise through 7 days or 2 weeks, and no problem. That would be true of a lot of our sort of diabetic hypertensives, people that are 50 pounds overweight. It's as if the system is saying, thank God, finally we don't have to eat and deal with a bunch more food. We're just going to sit here and cruise and just eat our own fat up for a couple of weeks and just sort of restabilize. So I'll see a lot of people like that will just saunter in, to a session with me, and I'd say, well, how long have you been fasting? Like, at 21 days, like 21 days. It's like, oh my God. They're like, fine. All right. Other people, they're 5 days into a water fast and they're crying for their mother. It's like, you never know. You just can't, there's no telling.
Yeah.
So every person is different, and even the people, every fast is different. Everyone has their own character.
Yep.
So just like every cold isn't quite the same.
Right. Great, thanks. Donna says, does the pleasure trap cause or interact with eating disorders, or are these totally different psychological issues? In treating eating disorders, the current trend in counseling and in meals seems to not make sense as related to what we are learning regarding eating plants. I'm not dealing with this personally, but have family members who've been working in this field for many years.
Right. Current thinking in eating disorders doesn't understand the pleasure trap. And so they're operating, they're basically out there, they're like blind people with a stick trying to feel their way. And it's not that they don't know anything, just like a blind person with a stick can learn a fair amount about its environment and be pretty good. But boy, it's a lot harder to navigate an environment with a stick than it is with your eyes. So the pleasure trap is such an essential component of understanding the nature of food motivation that without the pleasure trap, you're in trouble. And so most people attempting to treat eating disorders without being deeply referenced into the pleasure trap are really, they're spitting into an 80-mile-an-hour wind. Until you understand calorie density, hyperpalatable food, etc., and understand the inexorable drive of the nervous system to go that direction, and the fact that if you indulge that, then you're going to get overweight, and that the great fear of women is going to be overweight, so that's why you've got eating disorders in the first place. It's like, until you sort of weave together a coherent picture of what's taking place there, you're got hope. I mean, that's what it is. It's like, you can be supportive and sweet and try to say the right things to encourage people as much as you can. But until you can tell a bulimic, listen, you can't be eating the rich foods. Stay out of the rich foods, and then you won't have that hyperpalatable blast. And also,
You can eat to satiety and you won't gain weight. In fact, if you're overweight, you're going to lose weight. You can eat all you want. Okay, but don't salt the food up, don't sugar it up, don't oil it up.
Mm-hmm.
Get it natural. It turns out that when people do that, very often these eating disorders fade off. It isn't that they're not lurking around. They are. It's the pleasure trap's lurking around. But the superiority of that approach to me, you know, I don't have published science, but I have my personal clinical record. I have to tell you, it's remarkable, particularly with something like bulimia. The notion that this is where, you know, the myths of moderation raise their head. It's like the notion that no, it should be reasonable, really learn how to eat reasonably. It's like, you eat reasonably and you're walking into trouble, particularly with a hair trigger nervous system, like so many women are. The hyper-conscientious woman is a walking time bomb for an eating disorder. That personality characteristic is a loaded gun in the modern environment. And so to be trying to manage an eating disorder without a good understanding of the pleasure trap is really fighting sharks with one hand tied behind your back.
Yeah, I was bulimic for 6 years in my early 20s, and the way they treat eating disorders was deplorable then, and it's deplorable now. But I'll tell you, it is eating starch and following calorie density. You get to eat so much. It's like every day is Christmas when you really understand that.
So much better.
It's so great. Carolyn says, I'm going to have a tooth implant. The first 3 days is to be smoothies, very soft foods. Do you think it would be okay for me to fast? I will be put to sleep for this procedure. I hope not put to sleep in the way we put our pets to sleep. Anesthetize, I was thinking. Yeah.
There'd be no reason not to fast if you're healthy, and we aren't. I don't see that there would be any problem with it. So if a person wanted to pick a time like that, when they've got their mouth that's a mess and sore, and basically say, hey, well, this is as good a time as any to do a 3-day water fast. Don't go to work. We don't want to be getting in and out of racing in and out of Macy's for a sale. The reason why, we want to be quiet. We want to just be calm and quiet and stay at home and relax. Because when you're water fasting, when you're in ketosis, you start moving around, you start burning up muscle tissue. So you don't want to do that. So, but otherwise, there'd be no reason, as long as you can orchestrate it, there'd be no reason not to fast during that time.
Nice, thank you. Mary says, I work in a stressful environment in the operating room, and I have to return my walkie-talkie to the charging station in the workroom where they also have high-calorie foods. Mm-hmm. There isn't anyone else that can return it for me, and it needs to go back so the next day the battery will be charged so I can communicate. Mm-hmm. The problem is that if I've had a stressful day, I'm more vulnerable to eating the crap that's in the room as my defenses are down. I even feel I deserve the crap to self-medicate because I've had such a stressful day. I can see that this does not serve me well, but I feel compelled to reach for the nuts and skip the basket of apples. Please advise, as I know that eating nuts won't get me to the weight I want. How do I not get into the pleasure trap with this type of setup? I have to return the Voicera walkie-talkie to the charging station where all the others are.
Yeah, I'm going to change a little bit of the person's interpretation. You're not self-medicating anything. Okay? You have a standing order inside the system that says, eat the richest food in the environment. If you are an unusually bright and unusually motivated person, you can have a competing, non-instinctual learned behavior that says, don't do it. Okay? That thing almost never can stand up to the instinct. So the notion that you're trying to self-medicate something is ludicrous. You're not self-medicating anything. You're simply, your resolve is now reduced because you're exhausted. Okay? If you are tired, you do not have the amount of steam to face down the instincts that are compelling you to do what is the right thing in evolution. Right? So that's how one should think about the problem. Now, I could give you a bunch of cute strategies that would, let's begin this. It's a good example. Let's begin this with what AJ and I, if we were to put our heads together, we would say, what's the problem? The problem is the environment. Okay, so that's the problem. We've identified it. So now what are we going to do? We're going to change it. We're going to change the environment. Right? Okay, well, how are we going to change the environment? Because we're going to have some very enticing whole natural food in that room where they've got the stuff. So what would that be? Okay, I'm not sure. How about a really good fruit salad? Pretty good. Strawberries, oranges, bananas, apples, etc. All right there.
Or cooked potatoes, cooked Japanese sweet potatoes, or hand-canned.
That's because you're AJ. No, I'm talking about a normal person.
Okay.
So we had a really attractive fruit salad. Got some cherries in it, whatever. All right, pineapple, I don't know. Whatever you really like. That should be in there. It should be in there with cellophane over it. A big sign on it that says don't touch. This is going to be enticing to other people too. All right? So now when you walk in there, now we've got a competing demand. So of course there's rich food, there's nuts there. And what is your nervous system saying? Eat the richest food in the environment. Okay? But you have to understand, you're only going to be in there for less than 60 seconds. We're exposed for 60 seconds in that environment. You put the charger down, you go to the refrigerator, you pull out your food, you've got a nice high quality plastic fork. It doesn't make you feel like a loser because it's actually an expensive, good quality fork that feels like a real fork. And away you go, and you leave, and there's some place that you're going where you're going to sit and you're going to eat this magnificent fruit salad. There. We've now changed your environment, okay, and given you a chance. So that's how I would do it.
Nice. Dr. Lisle, I want to respect your time. There is about 12 questions left. Would you like to continue or maybe just do what we did before at your convenience and answer these questions? It's up to you completely.
Let's see, we're going to keep going.
We're going to keep going. Great.
I may quit on you, but we're going to keep going for now.
Thank you. And everyone watching, if we are not respecting your time, feel free to drop off and please watch this later. Okay, thank you so much. So in regards to, we talked about the person with the dental implant possibly fasting. Charlotte mentioned that she recently had the first phase and had to do a water fast, had to wait to do a water fast because of the pain, because she had to take antibiotics and pain medicine. And if she's correct, you cannot be on medications when you're fasting. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Except for I think thyroid is allowed people. That's what I've heard at True North anyway. I know you mentioned an ALS patient being helped by fasting. I'm wondering if you know any Huntington's disease patients.
I think that's a different animal.
Thank you. Peggy says, I heard you refer to an easy keeper on your podcast. Can you please explain that term for humans?
Yeah. Yeah, if you've got thick genes. So you got an efficient metabolism. If you're overweight, you're an easy keeper. If you're substantially overweight, if you're 50 pounds overweight or more, you're an easy keeper. That's what they call it in the horse trade. Right? So I am not an easy keeper. It's hard for a calorie to stick to me. Right? So that's just how it is.
It's so unfair, you and Charles. You just can't understand what it's like to be us.
Alan's an easy keeper.
Wow, me too.
Yeah, if Alan ate conventionally, he'd be 30 or 40 pounds heavier than he is.
Wow.
So, but that's what that means. It just means the genetic differences in people.
Nice, thank you. So Jiri says, I remember you mentioning sometime in the series how there isn't a life situation where evolutionary psychology doesn't fit in, as in how you're able to meaningfully analyze any situation through the EP lens.
Yeah. As
much as I find myself leaning towards this, I can't stop wondering about how we are bioelectromagnetic beings and how it possibly makes energy, psychology, kinesiology, and other streams come alive. Do you not see much value in those psychological perspectives?
No, none.
I didn't think so. All right, that was easy to answer. Okay, Cheryl says, I tend to eat 2 healthy meals, whole food, plant-based, SOS-free per day, leaving about 16 hours of no eating overnight. Sometimes I only have 1 meal. I am losing weight very slowly, 5 pounds per month, while others who eat more lose faster. I do various types of exercise daily. I am wondering if the eating style I described is actually causing me to hold on to weight because I do not eat that much, so I am preserving the fat stores as in a famine.
No. A+. 5 pounds a month is spectacular.
Yeah.
You're shedding 20,000 calories a month, or about 650 calories a day. That it's remarkable that the system is so dynamic that it would do that. So no, the body's not trying to hold on. I think this is hilarious. I'll hear things like, well, I'm holding on to weight. You're not holding on to anything, okay? You're essentially a hot water heater and with a fuel source. And so if the fuel source is too rich, that's how it's going to work. So you're just basically a machine, and a machine with certain parameters, the way things are built. You're like a car, different engines on a car, etc. So there's no holding on to anything. This person is eating much healthier than they were eating before, or else they would not be dropping weight the way they are now, assuming that they're not starving themselves, assuming they're eating to reasonably to satiation. If you're dropping 5 pounds a month, that is outstanding work. Just keep at it, slow, fast way. Everything's going perfectly.
It took me 27 months to lose the 50 pounds I've kept off. People are looking for these like keto and these fast things, and they don't realize that, and they don't want to stay in it for the long haul.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So this is an interesting question. If we care for our children in order to further our genes, why would we care about adopted children?
Yeah, that's because you're what's known as a K strategy species. So you have a species differ on a dimension about how many they reproduce. So, and our species reproduces phenomenal amounts. Like, spider might have 10,000 children, and whereas a human has 1, 2, 3, sometimes somewhere less than 10. So we are a K strategy species. So is a rhinoceros. So are whales. The big mammals, don't usually have very many twins or triplets or things like that. I don't know if horses ever have twins. It'd be kind of interesting to know. I doubt it. But humans will. Humans have a few twins, about 1 in 26 births or something like that. Now, so you are what's known as a K strategy species, which means that each offspring is really valuable. And so you are designed with tremendous instincts to be attracted to small children and babies, and to care about them and to be highly responsive to their emotional processes. So people, you will feel a success and delight in the process of watching an individual struggle and then become more comfortable, struggle and then become more successful. So it's exciting, for example, to watch Rocky get better, in the story Rocky. Hell, I'm not related to him, but I'm an individual, I'm a human, and that human usually is designed by nature to have a few people that they really care about. And in particular, when it comes to offspring or young things, you're designed by nature to find them really cute and fascinating and adorable, and attempt to want to help them. That would not be true if you were a high reproduction species. If you had, if typically you had a clutch of 8 or 10 children at a time, you just wouldn't have that. It's like, look, come suck the teat, you better get yours, and don't bother me if you get left out. That's how it would be, okay? But because we are every human is such a precious, highly expensive animal, we have many instincts about caring for those offspring that are very intense. And so the fact that those can be tripped if it's not your own is interesting. And it's a beautiful thing that it's true, that it can happen. Probably this has to do with instincts that were shaped by the fact that our ancestors lived in very intensely familial hunter-gatherer packs, where if a couple of parents died, or one of the parents died, the child, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 year old child, is very likely a high genetic blood relative of yours. And so the instincts to be helpful for little people, because those little people probably were genetically related to you, that gets translated very easily across into a modern environment where it's not yours. You even know that it's not yours conceptually, but your Stone Age brain doesn't know that it's not yours. And so as a result, people can adopt and find great satisfaction in adoption.
Nice. I Googled if horses can have twins. They say it's a very rare exception, just in case you wanted to know. Okay, so we have a question from Karen. Is coffee or alcohol only to be avoided for those for whom they are triggers, or for everyone? I am a person who is at my ideal weight and just maintaining at this point, and drink a cup of coffee in the morning, but never more, or drink a cocktail or two occasionally when out with friends for dinner, once a month maybe. Is there still a reason for me to work to eliminate those? And if so, could you please explain why?
Yeah, this gets down to, all right, you change your oil every 3,000 miles or every 4,000 miles. So, which is better? Well, if we look long enough at a car and we look at its track record and its history of troubles, we're going to find a slight advantage to the car where we change the oil every 3,000 miles instead of every 4,000. Now, it's going to be close, but it's going to be there. And it may take a long time. We might not see it show up until the cars have had at least 60 or 80,000 miles. And then statistically, if we look at enough of them, if we've got a big fleet of them, we've got 1,000, we've got 1,000 identical cars and 500 of them, they're all Camrys. And so 500 of them we change every 4,000 miles, 500 of them we change every 3,000 miles. We might not see any difference in service troubles until 60, 80,000 miles. Then we're going to start to see it. Now, will it be graphic? No, it's just going to be statistical. And so that's exactly the same thing that's going to go on with any kind of dietary or lifestyle discretion. So the more impactful it is, not changing the oil every 15,000 miles instead of every 3,000, that would be like cigarette smoking. Like, okay, you're just polluting the hell out of the system, and you're asking for trouble. And we're going to start seeing problems by 50,000 miles. But the difference between 3,000 and 4,000, pretty slight. Are we going to see much difference? It's going to be hard to see it. Is it going to be there? Oh, yeah. It'll be there. If we look at it, we look at enough data, we look at a big enough population, we're going to eventually pick up the difference. It will be there. And so we know both coffee and alcohol, these are coffee's a significant caffeine, significant nervous system stimulant. It's going to disrupt your sleep a little bit. This is going to have very mild little effects. They're going to be very subtly cumulative. Will you pay a price? Probably not. Might you? You might. How big a price will it be? Yeah, it's probably going to hit you at 84. Maybe you've got Alzheimer's at 84 and you wouldn't have had it. Or maybe you got it at 84 and you wouldn't have got it till 88. Okay, so alcohol, same thing. You have a couple cocktails here and there. What's the difference? Well, very slight statistical difference in having a big time liver problem, and probably significant difference late in life in terms of how much liver function you have. So is it going to show up in the first 60, 70 years? Probably not. Will it show up by 80? Maybe. Okay. So yeah, I'm not anybody's mother. So, but the notion that one could, quote, get away with it scot-free, like, just doesn't make any sense. Okay. You're just as if you didn't change your oil for 6,000 miles, which sometimes I did that, I got distracted and didn't do it. And it's that feeling of, well, how bad is it? Well, it's not good. Okay, so now when I changed it, it's like, oh, I always feel virtuous. I got the oil changed again. But some damage was done in those 3,000 miles, between the 3,000th mile and the 6,000th mile, when the oil was dirty and it was continuing to recirculate through there, and there was friction because of the little debris. in the engine parts. Okay, so I can't reverse that damage. That damage is there. Now I can continue to take care of the car well, and if I'm taking super good care of it from here on out, 250,000 miles later, finally have a problem. So, yeah. So the answer is, are you, quote, getting away with it? No. You're not getting away with it because we know that statistically you're increasing your likelihood of trouble. How much trouble? Not much. Those are minor indiscretions. Altogether, that's probably about the same as having a hunk of fish a week.
Mhm.
It's probably about what it is. How bad is that? Not much. It's there, though. That's
Yeah.
how I look at that.
And you never know if you're the person that's going to get this disease or not. It's like Dr. Greger says, I know I'm going to die. I just don't want it to be my fault. So
Yeah.
I just don't like to take chances with stuff.
Yeah, I'm not sanctimonious. I'm going to have some of Mary's chocolate pudding. The very slight impact on my health that would come from that. What do I really think about that? I'm just not worried about it. Okay. Certainly a couple glasses of alcohol and a few cups of coffee. How much? That's significantly more problematic than Mary's chocolate pudding once in a while. But is it some enormous crime? No. It's a parking ticket.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Don't pay your parking tickets, you get towed though. Okay. So Shauna's loving this class, says you're amazing. She's given up caffeine for 2 months now, according to her Fitbit. In her deep state sleep goes anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes, average 45, gets in bed 10, up at 6 Monday, Friday, but I guess it's showing she's only getting 7 hours sleep, weekends a little more. Should she be worried? I don't know what else to do. Is it just me? Should she stop listening to all the scares that you need 8 hours of sleep?
Yeah, don't listen to them. Done. Okay.
Cool.
You just exercise. Don't artificially stimulate your system. Exercise. Go to sleep. Sleep to satiation as well as you can. Some people have to use alarm clocks to get up before they really want to because they've got to catch work. So you want to move your going to bed back to the point where you could sleep to satiation, often. That's what you want to do. But I wouldn't worry about hitting somebody's chart. Okay, it should be about you feeling comfortable. That's what it needs to be.
Speaking of hitting somebody's chart, there's a question, if you could please explain it, starch targets, which we will have up in the member center if it's not already there.
Yeah, starch targets, I just jotted down one day, started using it with clients, and then a client hated it. So it's starch, fruit salad, and exercise. I would have put vegetables on there, but it's like, nah, then now I got 7 check marks. It's just 1 check mark too many. Besides, everybody knows they ought to be eating as many vegetables as they want, but they might not think that way about fruit. They might worry that fruit has too much sugar. And salad, they might feel like they should eat a salad every day, but they wouldn't because it's too much trouble. So therefore, we're going to get like a little extra point there. It's like you did a good thing to eat salad. And people aren't going to exercise every day, but they might think they should. But no, that's something we want. We want the person's motives to be essentially swirling around these 4 things: starch, fruit, salad, exercise. And the idea is you're not going to be perfect, but we're going to try to hit somewhere around 5 of these a day. So we may often leave one out, but obviously starch is there to say, listen, when it comes to your health, 3 of the 6 best things you can do every day are to eat a starch. So we want you to be thinking about morphing your motivation and your diet around starches. That's the key. That's the fundamental. You never have to eat a vegetable. You never have to eat a fruit. Never have to eat a nut. Never have to eat a seed. Okay? If all you were eating was starches, you'd be great. You'd be way healthier than the average American. Everything would go really well. So now, can we eat those other things? Sure, but you don't have to. But if you try to just eat the other things and don't eat starches, you're in trouble because you're going to be needing calorie density and you're going to find it somewhere. So that's why I call it starch targets. So the idea is when I say a starch, I don't mean a bite of potato. I mean you eat a meal where the wet starch is the main component. calorically of the meal. So we want to do that 3 times a day if we eat 3 meals a day. If you eat 2 meals a day, they're both starches like our one gal did, then go ahead and give yourself 3 checks for those 2 starches. Okay, because essentially your meals were all starch-based. And so it just happens we have 3 checks because most people would eat 3 times, not 2. And then fruit, just any fruit that you eat, you get a check mark. You do 10, 15 minutes of exercise legitimately, not just, not just putting the kid in the car and going to Macy's and then getting the kid out. And that doesn't count. We need to do about 15 minutes of, focus exercise where we put the body into some stress. And we do that, you get a check mark. And if you are saintly and you actually make a salad, good. That's special. So if you do a really good job, you can get 6 check marks in a day. I'm looking for people to get 80% in a week. So the idea is to hit about 34 or 35 of these check marks a week. And so you can kind of keep track on a weekly basis with the starch targets that this is what healthy living is. Healthy living is 80% on the starch targets program. And that's what it looks like.
Beautiful. Thank you. Kirti says she knows you mentioned that you didn't recommend melatonin, but how do you feel about GABA, the supplement GABA, not the prescription GABA? She says she noticed mood alterations, feels happier, isn't sure it's in her head. She takes it for nerve pain because she has lots of allergies to starches, with the exception of beans and lentils.
Yeah, I don't know. This is now wandering in a highly idiosyncratic situation. So I don't know what pain she's talking about as a result of the starches, what starches are involved. If they are, we should be eating something that doesn't cause the pain. And so this all sounds like a mess. And so I don't know. I can't speak specifically to what the plan would be. My plan would be to eat a diet that doesn't cause the pain. That way we're not using any medications.
Right.
So I think that medication sounds to me, I'm aware of that medication. I'm aware of people that have been addicted to it. It's a problem. So what do I think about it? Like I think of all medications, careful. Mm-hmm. Very often the benefit is not as great as the cost. Not uniformly, not every case, but in most cases, that regimen sounds like it's probably due for some serious re-examination.
Terrific. If no one else posts, we have 3 more questions. So, wait, maybe she could go to Alan. Dr. Goldhammer might be able to.
Absolutely.
Because he loves those complicated cases.
Yeah.
Anna says that says you're doing a fantastic job, and she thanks you. She says, Dr. Lisle mentioned that there is no condition that alters your hunger drive, but I've just been diagnosed with adult onset type 1 diabetes and started on insulin. I was always skinny, but have gained about 15 pounds eating whole food, plant-based, SOS free. When my sugar goes low from the insulin, which happens a few times a week as I get the hang of this, I am starving and I feel I could devour the contents of the fridge. Even though it's all compliant food, I can eat a large volume of food and just be as hungry the next day. I think this may be the cause of my weight gain. And I'm curious if Dr. Lisle thinks it's possible for insulin use to contribute to overeating, even on compliant food. My sense is that my normal satiety mechanism is off, but it could be that now I have insulin and I'm using the food I eat in a more efficient way. I'm curious what his vast experience says. Thank you very much for what you do to make the world a healthier and better place.
Yeah, I would not say that there aren't pathologies that couldn't mess with the mechanisms. Of course there are. Okay, so you see this, for example, with thyroid patients. So you'll have somebody blow out thyroid and then a year later they're 40 pounds heavier. So it's not that it isn't possible. So probably that was either I said something sloppy or it was misconstrued. There's no psychological motivation that's going to cause that thing those mechanisms to go haywire. But there are a number of ways that you could disturb those mechanisms through medications, for example, would be notorious for messing with the satiety mechanism. That's why they continue to trot out amphetamines in every different shape and form and color as the next is the next savior for the weight loss problem. It's because amphetamines will reduce the hunger drive. So will cigarette smoking. Nicotine will do the same thing. So, and things can also cause it to go the other direction. So people will go on various and sundry psychotropic medications or other medications, and they find that they're gaining a bunch of weight. So, so insulin and how insulin might be used to treat a type 1 diabetes, it wouldn't surprise me at all that there could be issues there and problems. And if the person is gaining weight to the point that they're actually overweight, in other words, they're gaining substantial fat stores, then it sounds like, however, you know, this is a guessing game, and this is a tricky business to try to manage something like type 1 diabetes. And so that might not be so easy to know what foods you should be eating and how you should be using the medication to get that thing right. You're clearly crippling along with a compromised system. And so I don't know that specific individual's parameters, but this is an arena for people with some expertise in dealing with a case like this. If it looks like it's not, the existing management plan isn't working as well as it should.
Nice, thank you. Cheryl says, on week 3, when you discuss conditioned cramming, could this also be called binge eating? My husband never eats breakfast, rarely eats lunch, and he binge eats at dinner, whether or not he ate lunch. He's done this for over a decade. Please explain how this is negatively affecting his body. What is the best way to go about breaking the binge eating habit?
Yeah, conditioned cram and binge eating are, I think, they're essentially the same thing. They are conditioned cram might not be nearly as, when we start talking about binge eating can be extraordinary in what it is that people do. So I think it's the same phenomenon. I think the difference is that conditioned cram would be a generic, would be sort of a generic description of the underlying process, and binge eating would be an extreme version. So a lot of people could have a conditioned cram circuit where they start to get hungry even when they're full, and they eat some more. And if they're not super food reactive and they're not eating food that's super hyper palatable, they just cram in an extra 400 or 500 calories and call it a day. And I think a lot of people do that. And so that would be a typical conditioned cram. Binge eating, when we start talking about a diagnosable big time binge eating disorder, the similar thing is happening. And in other words, the person, I believe, is conditioned to, I think there is a conditioned cram process that's taking place there, but very often it will go along with some other things. So the person may have restricted out of a desire to not, be an overeater, and then once they start eating, they might also then be eating hyperpalatable foods, and behind the previous several hours of restriction. And then on top of the hyperpalatable foods and the inherent characteristics of the individual, and the fact that they have a conditioned cram circuit once they get it rolling, then there are people that binge eat that can eat prodigious amounts of food. And it's even possible to eat prodigious amount of food that's whole natural food. It's rare, but it's possible. The conditioned cram, what looks like essentially a binge eater, even on whole natural foods. Exceedingly unusual. Very much more common to have a binge eater that's eating hyperpalatable food, obviously. This is, once again, we're circling back around to trying to treat eating disorders without understanding the pleasure trap.
Yeah.
Okay, so so anyway, I can't remember the rest of the question. Sort of lead me the last part of it.
What's the best way to go about breaking the binge eating habit, and how is 20 years of this or 10 years of this negatively affecting his body?
Well, there's nothing about it other than, in other words, it doesn't matter that it's a binge, it's what you're binging. So if you're binging on Kipper snacks and cheese, you know what I mean, then we got a problem. And it doesn't, I guess I'm saying there's nothing about the binge process itself that's a problem in principle, other than the person's probably overeating, and they're probably overeating on really rich food. So the fact that they would binge, you might say, well, is there something about the binge that's inherently destructive? No, I don't think so. Not particularly. I think your system's pretty well adapted. That's why what's unusual is a conditioned cram, not cramming. Cramming would be natural to people. There's rich food around, cram it. So you're not doing any damage when you cram your stomach full up to the gills and you're ready to throw up. That's not doing you any damage. The damage will be if the biochemistry of that food is inconsistent with your natural history and it's overly rich, and it's effectively a problem. You know, then we've got a problem. So, and even cramming over and over and over again is the cramming isn't the problem. It's what you're cramming is the problem. So it's all the pleasure trap.
Terrific. I'm going to close the Q&A now, guys, so that Dr. Lisle can answer the last question. Before I do, I just want to read the comments that some people wrote in. Dr. Lisle, the series was just outrageously wonderful. Thank you both so much. What a great program. Thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot. And what a mind-blowing way to end the course. This is the best information I've ever been taught. Thank you. So the last question. Why do people punish themselves with food knowingly, self-inflicting, and destroying themselves?
They're not punishing themselves with food. Okay? They are not punishing themselves with food. They are following an instinct towards what their nervous system was designed to tell them is the right decision. The fact that they know that they can learn that that is incorrect, that their instinct is leading down the wrong path, learning that that's true is almost completely ineffective at stopping it. Okay. So that's the issue. So it's a great question to end on, because it highlights how difficult this is to sink in. So this person obviously is an intelligently asked question, attempting to be deep and thoughtful, but we see the error. They're not trying to punish themselves. They're trying to survive and reproduce. They're following an ancient call. These are shadows of forgotten ancestors, people you'll never meet and can't imagine who they were. And they were designed with an instinct to laugh, smile, to flirt, to stare, to find beauty in certain environments, and to love the smell of cooked food, and to love their children, take delight in jokes. They're just like you. And they crowded around whenever there was any rich food that came into the village, and everybody was all excited about it, and they grabbed all they could and got all of it that they could get their share of. Because it was rare. It's hard to get. Okay? So when people self-destruct by eating huge percentages of their diet from very rich food, they are self-destructing not because they are punishing themselves. This is the extraordinary misunderstanding of trauma theory. Okay? This is the mistaken thinking that self-destructive behavior must be caused by a self-destructive, twisted process. It does not require that inference, and that is incorrect. Okay? What you're observing, the self-destructive behavior, is being caused by an adaptive instinct. That is the nature of the pleasure trap. And so that is the story of this class, that you don't punish yourself with this food. You are rewarding yourself for what with what you believe is the greatest, most important reward to get. The highest density food that you can get your hands on. Okay? So the metaphor would be, who should you go for? The person you find the most charming and attractive, or the person that you find plain? You know, what are you supposed to do? We are telling you, go to the person you find plain. They're better. They're healthier. They're just that's a better place for you to go. That's where you should go. And your instincts are saying, but it's Brad Pitt. It's Clark Gable. Okay? And they smile, and they're charming, and they tell funny jokes, and they can dance. Okay? That's what the rich food is. It's super normal stimuli, and it lures you in. Okay? So that is the problem that we face. That's why it's difficult. That is why the best thing that we can do, don't try to work on yourself, because there's nothing wrong with you. Work on your environment. Try to take yourself back to a simpler time, with simpler foods, and simpler choices in this dimension. That's the road home. And that's what AJ and I are here to try to help you do.
Wow, beautiful. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for being here. And Dr. Lau, this has been, like Dan said, mind-blowing, a privilege, an honor, and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, AJ.
Okay. Good night, everyone.